Lily was walking to table 6 when the hand grabbed her wrist. Hard, no warning. She spun around. The tray hit the floor. The man was enormous. Black beard, bare chest, tattoos crawling up his throat. "Smile for us, sweetheart." She tried to pull away. His grip tightened until her fingers went numb. His buddy stepped in behind her. Too close. The third one knocked the tray out of her hands. Cups exploded across the tile. And then the big one grabbed the front of her shirt and ripped it open. In front of everyone, Lily froze, both hands pressing torn fabric to her chest, the whole diner watching, not one person getting up. The big one grabbed her chin, forced her face up. "Let's see who can save you now." Nobody moved. Then one chair scraped back. From the corner, nobody had been watching. A man stood up, silver hair, frost beard, eyes like the bottom of a river. He looked at the 3 men. That was all. The big one's grip loosened. The most dangerous man in the room had been sitting in the corner the whole time, watching, waiting. You just picked the wrong diner. But to understand what came next, you need to know how that night began. Greer's diner had been sitting on the edge of Route 9 for 11 years. It had survived 2 floods, 1 kitchen fire, and a highway expansion that nearly swallowed it whole. Tonight it was going to survive something else entirely. But nobody inside knew that yet. Walt Greer stood behind the counter at 11 o'clock at night, polishing a mug that didn't need polishing. That was the tell. Anyone who knew Walt would have recognized it immediately. When Walt polished mugs, something in the room had his attention. He was 67, silver hair, blue flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, the kind of face that had stopped being surprised by people a long time ago. 31 years as a cop did that. 12 of those as a detective did the rest. He didn't own a diner because he loved cooking. He owned a diner because after everything he'd seen and done and testified to, this was the only version of a quiet life he still knew how to build. Most nights the quiet held. Tonight he could feel it starting to crack. He watched Lily move between tables, 26 years old, dark hair pulled back, green eyes that never fully relaxed, even when she smiled. 8 months working his floor, and she had never once been late, never once complained, never once asked him about the past he didn't talk about. She was good at her job. She was better at pretending everything was fine. Walt had noticed the scar on her left wrist in her second week. Old, faded, the kind that didn't come from an accident. He had never said a word about it. But he had never forgotten it either. Right now, Lily was heading toward the far tables, tray balanced, completely unaware that 3 tables away a man was watching her move. Not Walt, the man in the corner booth. Walt had noticed him at 10:45. He came in alone, soaking wet from the rain. Didn't shake it off at the door the way most people did. Just walked straight to the corner booth like he had reserved it in his mind before he ever got out of his car. Sat down, hung his vest on the hook beside the booth, ordered black coffee from Lily without looking up, then put both hands around the mug and looked out the window. That was it. That was all he did. And yet Walt could not stop coming back to him. The man was not young, late 50s, maybe. Silver hair pushed back hard from his face. A beard gone white at the edges. Arms covered in ink that had been there long enough to become part of him rather than decoration. Military posture that nobody had taught him recently. On the vest, Patches Walt couldn't read from across the room. He didn't need to read them. The way the man sat told him everything. Back straight, hands visible, eyes that moved across the room every few minutes in a pattern. Door, windows, counter, tables, door again, without any expression at all. This was a man who never fully stopped working. Walt recognized that because he was the same way. Once the man's eyes had moved across Lily. Just once, a fraction of a second. It was not the look Walt had learned to watch for. It was something else. Something Walt understood without being able to name it immediately. Like someone recognizing a version of a wound they had seen before. Walt filed it, went back to watching the room. Then the door opened. And everything Walt had been quietly dreading for 9 years walked in out of the rain. Conrad Hale didn't look like trouble. That was the thing about him. That had always been the thing about him. He was lean, well-dressed, dark coat, gray at the temples. The kind of stillness in his face that came not from peace, but from absolute control. The kind of man who had spent so many years deciding how rooms felt that it had become unconscious. He came in with 3 men. Walt didn't know the 3 men, but he knew their purpose immediately. They were large, heavily built. They spread out as they entered. Not randomly, not the way people spread out when they're looking for a table. Deliberately. One toward the counter. One toward the back, one staying near the door. Positioning. Conrad let them move. He himself walked slowly to the table nearest the counter, sat down, and looked straight at Walt. No hesitation. No scan of the room first. He had known exactly where Walt would be standing. 9 years. 9 years since Walt had last seen that face. Across a courtroom, not a diner. 9 years since he had stood in a witness box and said the things he believed needed to be said, and watched the consequences of those words land on the people in that room. Some of those consequences he had made peace with. Some he still woke up at 3 in the morning thinking about. Conrad held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then he picked up the menu. Like they were strangers, Walt's hands were flat on the counter, steady. He had trained them to be steady in rooms like this one. Rooms where the air had changed and most people hadn't noticed. Yet, he looked at Lily, still moving between tables, still unaware. He looked at the man in the corner booth who had gone very still. The kind of still that meant he had felt the room change and was now deciding what that meant. And Walt understood. Whatever was going to happen tonight had been coming for a long time. It had just finally arrived. Conrad's men didn't start with violence. They never did. That was the thing Walt had learned about men like this. They started small. Testing. Pushing the edges, seeing what the room would allow. The first thing was the look. The big one, black beard, bare chest under his vest, arms like bridge cables, turned in his seat and watched Lily walk past. Too long, too obvious. The kind of look designed to be noticed. Lily noticed. Walt saw her notice. She adjusted her route slightly. The way she always did, automatic, practiced. Giving the table a wider berth without making it obvious she was doing it. The big one smiled at his buddy. Second thing, the words. When Lily came to take their order, the dark-haired one leaned back in his chair and looked her up and down slowly before she had even opened her mouth. Well, he let the words sit there. Service just got a whole lot better. Lily held her pen over her order pad, expression neutral, voice professional. What can I get you? How about you start with your name? "Lily, what can I get you? Lily." He said it like he was tasting it. "Pretty name. You as pretty when you're not working?" The bald one laughed. Lily wrote down their orders without reacting, collected the menus, turned to leave. The dark-haired one reached out and flicked the end of her ponytail. She stopped walking. Didn't turn around, just stopped. 1 second. 2. Then kept moving. The big one said something to his buddy in a low voice. They both laughed. Not at what was said. At the fact that she kept walking. Like her trying to leave was the funniest part of the whole thing. Walt's hand found the edge of the counter. He looked at Conrad. Conrad was watching his men with the calm expression of a man watching something he had set in motion and was in no hurry to stop. Then he looked at Walt and smiled, just slightly, just enough. Third thing, and this was where Walt knew it was no longer testing. Lily came back with their food. Plates balanced on both arms, moving efficiently, not looking at any of them longer than she had to. She set down the first plate. The big one's hand shot out and grabbed her forearm. Not her wrist this time, her forearm, higher, harder. Lily's whole body went rigid. "Sit down with us, not a question, not even close to a question. I'm working." Her voice was steady. Walt didn't know how she kept it steady. "You can work later." She tried to pull her arm back. His fingers tightened. The bald one stood up from his seat and moved behind her. Slow, deliberate, blocking the aisle. The dark-haired one leaned forward on his elbows, grinning. Lily looked at the big one's hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. She didn't say anything else. Because she had been in enough rooms like this one to know that saying things didn't help. Walt came out from behind the counter. He moved carefully, not rushing, not reaching for anything, just stepping out onto the floor, making himself visible, making it clear that someone had noticed and was not going to look away. He got 3 steps. The bald one turned around, stepped into Walt's path without a word. 6'2", 240 pounds of immovable intention. Walt stopped, looked past him at Lily. She was looking back at him, and in her eyes, Walt saw something that hit him harder than anything else in that room. Not fear, not panic, but the specific exhaustion of someone who had been in this exact moment before and already knew how it ended. Like she had stopped expecting it to end any other way. That was the thing that made Walt's hands curl into fists at his sides. Not the big one's grip on her arm, not the bald one blocking his path. That look, that tired, already resigned, I knew this was coming look on a 26-year-old woman's face. Then the dark-haired one reached over, grabbed the front of her shirt, and ripped it open. One motion, no hesitation. The sound cut through every conversation in the diner. Lily stumbled back, both hands flying up, pressing the torn fabric against herself. Her tray hit the floor. Cups exploded across the tile. The diner went silent, completely, absolutely silent, except for the rain on the roof and the dark-haired one's laughter. He looked around the room, taking his time, meeting eyes, watching people look away one by one. The woman at the counter had both hands pressed over her mouth. The trucker in the back booth was staring at the table. The young couple by the window. The boy had his arm around the girl. Both of them frozen, neither of them moving. Nobody stood up. Nobody said a word. The dark-haired one grabbed Lily's chin and forced her face up. Her eyes were wet. Her lips were pressed together so hard they'd gone white. but she did not make a sound. She had learned not to make sounds. Let's see, who can save you now? Walt tried to push past the bald one. The bald one put one hand flat on Walt's chest and shoved him back against the counter, hard enough that Walt's back hit the edge and his breath left him. He felt every single one of those years in that moment. He looked at Lily. She was looking at the floor now, not because she was ashamed, because she was trying to be somewhere else in her mind. And Walt Greer, 31 years a cop, 11 years a diner owner, a man who had faced down things most people only read about, felt something break open in his chest. He had seen that look before. He had seen it in interview rooms and hospital corridors and courtrooms. He had never gotten used to it. He opened his mouth, and then the chair scraped back. One chair, one sound. From the corner, nobody had been watching. The scrape of it cut through the silence, the way a knife cuts through something that has been pulled too tight for too long. Clean, final. Every head turned. The man rose slowly from the corner booth. No rush, no performance, just a man standing up the way men stand up when they have already decided what they are going to do, and are in no particular hurry to prove it to anyone. Silver hair, frost beard, eyes the color of cold river water. He was not the largest man in the room, but something happened when he stood up. Something in the air. The way a room changes when the temperature drops suddenly, and everyone feels it before they understand why. The three men turned toward him, one by one. The laughter stopped first, then the smiling. Then the bald one's hand dropped from Walt's chest. The big one still had Lily's chin. His fingers loosened. Not releasing, just loosening, like his body had registered something his brain hadn't caught up with yet. The man from the corner walked toward them. Not fast, not slow, each step landing with the quiet certainty of someone who had walked toward hard things before and come out the other side. He stopped 6 feet away, looked at the big one's hand on Lily's face, then looked at the big one. The big one let go, just like that. Lily pulled back, both hands still clutching her torn shirt. She didn't run. She just stood there, like she needed a second to believe what she was seeing. The dark-haired one stepped forward, chin up, trying to recover the room. "You got a problem, old man?" The silver-haired man looked at him, didn't answer, just looked. The dark-haired one's jaw tightened. He glanced back at Conrad's table. A flicker, half a second, looking for direction. Conrad hadn't moved, hadn't changed expression, but he was watching the silver-haired man with an attention he had not given anything else in the room tonight. The dark-haired one turned back, spread his hands. "Walk away. This isn't your business. You just made it my business." Conrad had been watching the exchange from his table. He set down his coffee, stood up slowly, not because he was threatened, because something had just shifted in the room that he needed to control. The voice was low, not loud, the kind of voice that didn't need volume because it had never needed it. 3 words. The dark-haired one laughed, but it came out wrong. Too sharp, too quick. "You know who we ride with? I know exactly who you ride with." The silver-haired man's eyes moved to Conrad's table for the first time. Stayed there for exactly 2 seconds, then came back. "That's why I'm still talking instead of something else." The bald one moved, shifted his weight, angling his body, the specific body language of a man about to close distance. The silver-haired man didn't look at him. "Don't." One word. Flat as a road. You'll regret it before you finish the thought. The bald one stopped. Walt watched from behind the counter. His back still ached from hitting the edge. He was watching the silver-haired man the way he had learned to watch people who operated at a level most people never encountered. With complete attention and no assumptions. Then Conrad Hale stood up. The room shifted again. Conrad buttoned his coat, smoothed the front of it, took his time, then walked toward the silver-haired man with the unhurried ease of a man who had never once in his life needed to rush toward anything. He stopped a few feet away, looked at him for a long moment. Marcus Reed. Not a question, a statement like reading a name off a list he had memorized long ago. Viper, the Steel Wolves. He tilted his head slightly. Long way from your territory. Marcus didn't answer. I've heard about you. Conrad's voice was conversational, almost friendly. Decorated veteran. 2 tours. Came back different. Built something out of the wreckage. He paused. I respect that, actually. Men who survive things and find a purpose on the other side. Another pause. But this isn't your fight. You put your hands on a woman in front of me. Marcus's voice didn't change. It became my fight the second you did that. Conrad studied him for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Something colder. You don't know what this is. I know enough. Conrad was quiet for a moment. Then he turned, slowly, deliberately, and looked at Walt behind the counter. Do you know who this man is? He asked Marcus. Still conversational, still almost friendly. Do you know what he did? Marcus said nothing. Conrad looked at Walt, and for the first time tonight, his voice lost its careful control. Just slightly, just at the edges, just enough to show what was underneath. Walt Greer. He said the name like it had a taste he had been living with for a long time. 9 years ago, this man stood in a courtroom and testified against my brother. He paused. Let it land. My brother went to prison. He was not a good man. I will not stand here and tell you he was. But he was my brother, and he died in there 3 years into a 7-year sentence. Another pause. Quita now. Collapsed in the yard on a Tuesday morning. Heart attack. 61 years old. The diner was absolutely silent. I didn't come here for the girl. Conrad said it simply, like a fact. I came here for him. Walt came out from behind the counter. His back hurt. His hands were not as steady as they used to be. He was 67 years old, and he was very aware of it. But he walked out onto the floor, and he stood where everyone could see him. Conrad. His voice was level. Whatever you've got to say to me, say it to me. Leave everyone else out of it. Conrad looked at him. That's what I came here to do. He glanced at Lily, still standing near the counter, torn shirt, wide eyes. She just got in the way. She didn't get in the way of anything. Walt kept his voice steady. Your men chose to do what they did. That's on them, and on you. Conrad's jaw tightened. You cost me my brother. Your brother made choices that put him in that courtroom. Walt held his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. I told the truth about what I saw. That's all I did. That's all you did. Conrad repeated it softly, almost to himself. Like he had been turning those words over for 9 years and still couldn't make them sit right. I made a decision. Walt's voice dropped. Not softer, just quieter, more honest. I believed it was the right one. I still believe that. He paused. And I have lived with the cost of it every single day since. The room held its breath. Marcus stood between them, not moving, watching both men with the careful attention of someone who was recalculating everything he thought he understood about the situation. Lily had not moved from the counter. She was watching Walt. This man she had worked for 8 months, this quiet man with the flannel shirts and the old watch and the eyes that noticed everything, watching him stand in the center of the room, carrying something enormous with both hands and not putting it down. She didn't fully understand what she was hearing, but she understood the weight of it. And slowly, without thinking about it, without deciding to, she reached up to the coat hook behind the counter, took down Walt's old jacket, and pulled it around her shoulders. It was too big. It smelled like coffee and something older. She held it closed with both hands, and she stayed. Conrad looked at Walt for a long time. Then he looked at Marcus. "This doesn't end here," he said quietly. "You understand that?" Marcus looked back at him. "It ends wherever you decide to stop pushing." Conrad held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then he turned back to his table, sat down, picked up his coffee, like none of it had happened. But his hand, the one holding the mug, was not entirely steady. And Walt noticed. He noticed because in 31 years he had learned that the most dangerous moment with a man like Conrad Hale was never when he was angry. It was when he went quiet. Quiet meant he was done talking. Quiet meant he had moved on to deciding. Walt looked at Marcus. Marcus was already looking at him. Neither man said anything, but both of them understood with the specific clarity of men who had spent their lives reading the moment before things went wrong, that the moment had just passed, and what was coming next would not announce itself. The quiet lasted 11 minutes. Walt counted them. He had gone back behind the counter. Lily was sitting on the stool at the far end, Walt's jacket still around her shoulders, a cup of coffee in front of her that she hadn't touched. The regular customers had gone back to their plates, not because they were calm, but because they didn't know what else to do with their hands. Conrad's men sat at their table, not eating, not talking, waiting. Conrad himself had not moved, had not looked at Walt again, had not looked at Marcus again. He sat with his coffee and his careful stillness and his expression that gave nothing away. 11 minutes. Walt had been a detective long enough to know that silence like this was not peace. It was preparation. At 11 minutes and 40 seconds, Walt would remember this detail later, the way you remember small, precise things about moments that change everything. Conrad reached into his coat pocket, took out his phone, made a call, said 4 words, then put the phone away. Walt did not hear the 4 words, but he saw Marcus in the corner booth go very still, stiller than before, and Walt understood that whatever was coming had just been set in motion. The first sign was the headlights, 1 pair, sweeping across the rain-streaked windows. Walt thought nothing of it. Route 9 got traffic at all hours. Then a second pair, then a third, not moving past, slowing down, turning into the lot. Walt moved to the window, looked out through the rain. 3 black SUVs, parked in a line across the lot. Engines running. Nobody getting out yet. Just sitting there, watching the diner the way Conrad watched everything, with patience, with the confidence of something that already knew how this ended. Walt turned around. Conrad was looking at him now. For the first time since he had sat down, he smiled. Not the controlled, almost smile from before. A real one. 9 years is a long time to wait, Conrad said. But I'm a patient man. Walt said nothing. I want you to understand something. Conrad leaned forward slightly. This isn't personal. It feels personal. Everything feels personal when it's happening to you. Conrad picked up his coffee mug. But from where I'm sitting, this is just finishing something that should have been finished a long time ago. Walt looked at the SUVs in the lot. Then he looked at Lily. She had seen them too. She was sitting very still on her stool, both hands wrapped around her untouched coffee, her eyes moving between the window and Conrad's table. Walt caught her eye. He gave her the smallest nod he could manage. It meant, "Stay there. Stay calm. I see it." She gave him the smallest nod back. It meant, "I'm not going anywhere." Marcus had not looked at the windows. He didn't need to. He had made his call 23 minutes ago, before he ordered his coffee. Before Conrad had even walked through the door. Because Marcus Reed had not come to Greer's diner on a rainy Tuesday night by accident. He had known Conrad was coming here tonight, had known it for 6 days, since one of his contacts had picked up enough pieces of information to build a picture that Marcus didn't like the look of. A man with resources and a long memory and a specific address circled on a specific map. Walt Greer's diner. Marcus had come early, sat in the corner, ordered coffee, and waited to see what Conrad would do before deciding what he would do. What Conrad had done, what his men had done to Lily, had made the decision simple. Now Marcus looked at the door, then at his watch. 3 minutes. He looked at Walt. "Get her behind the counter," he said quietly. Now, Walt didn't ask questions. He moved to Lily immediately, hand on her shoulder, guiding her off the stool and behind the counter and down below the level of the window. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Stay down," Walt said. "Stay low. Don't move until I tell you." "Walt, Lily." He looked at her directly, steady. The way he had looked at frightened people in interview rooms for 31 years. "I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that?" She looked at him for a second, then nodded. Walt straightened up, and the door blew open. Not kicked, not broken, just opened, hard and fast, the way doors open when the person on the other side has decided that knocking is for people who are asking permission. 4 men came in first, then 3 more behind them, big, armed, moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who had done this kind of thing before and were not nervous about it. The diner erupted. Customers scrambled. Chairs scraped back. Someone knocked over a table. Plates and glasses exploding across the tile. A woman screamed once and then cut it off like she'd thought better of it. Conrad's 3 men were on their feet instantly. And then, from outside, cutting through the rain and the chaos and the sound of the diner coming apart, engines, not SUV engines, something else entirely, lower, rawer. The specific sound of machines built not for comfort, but for presence, growing from a distant rumble to something that vibrated in the chest, in the fillings of teeth, in the walls of the building itself. Motorcycles, dozens of them. The headlights swept across the windows one after another, a rolling wave of light that lit up the rain like a curtain of silver needles. Conrad turned toward the window. For the first time tonight, for the first time in what was probably a very long time, something moved behind his eyes that was not control. Marcus walked to the diner door and pushed it open. He stood in the doorway, rain hitting his shoulders, and looked out at the lot. The steel wolves had arrived. Not all of them. He hadn't called all of them. Just enough. Just the right ones. Men who had ridden with him for years, who had learned to read a situation the way Marcus had taught them. Not with anger first, but with clarity. They were parked in a line facing the SUVs. Engines running, nobody moving yet. Just presence meeting presence. Conrad's men outside had stopped getting out of their vehicles. Marcus turned back into the diner. What happened in the next 4 minutes was not clean. It was never going to be clean. The first punch was thrown by the bald one, the same one who had shoved Walt against the counter, who had blocked Lily's exit, catching one of Marcus's men across the jaw before anyone had fully decided whether talking was still an option. After that, it stopped being an option. The diner became something else. Tables went over. Glass broke. The jukebox in the corner took a hit from a body that crashed into it and went dark for the first time in 11 years. Walt pulled Lily tighter against the back of the counter, his body between her and the room. One hand on her shoulder, steady, constant, not letting go. "Keep your head down," he said. "Don't look up." She looked up anyway. She couldn't help it. She saw Marcus move through the chaos the way water moves through a broken dam, not fighting the current, using it. An elbow here, a redirection there. Economy of movement that came from decades of understanding how bodies work and how fast situations escalate when you let them. She saw the bald one go down hard. She saw the dark-haired one come at Marcus from the left, fast, low, shoulder down like a battering ram. Marcus didn't step back. He stepped into it. One hand caught the man's shoulder. The other found the back of his neck. He redirected the force. All of it. Straight down into the floor. The dark-haired one hit the tile face first. Didn't get up. Marcus hadn't even broken his stride. She saw the bald one grab a broken chair leg and swing it at Marcus's shoulder. Connect. And Marcus not even pause. Just turn and take the man's wrist and apply pressure until the chair leg hit the floor. She saw Conrad watching all of it from the center of the room, not fighting, calculating. And that stillness, that calculation, scared Lily more than any of the violence around it. Then everything stopped. One sound, sharp, metallic, the specific sound of a gun being cocked. Conrad was standing in the center of the room with a pistol leveled at Marcus. 6 feet between them. The fighting died instantly, both sides pulling back, creating space the way the sea pulls back before a wave. Marcus stood still, looked at the gun, looked at Conrad, didn't move. Enough. Conrad's voice was completely steady, back in control, back behind the wall. "This is done. Tell your people to back away and ride out of here." And we walk away. All of us. Marcus said nothing. "I'm not asking." Conrad's finger moved to the trigger. "I'm telling you how this ends. The only question is whether anyone else gets hurt before it does." The diner held its breath. Walt felt Lully's hand find his arm in the dark behind the counter. "Grip it. Hold on." He put his hand over hers. Marcus looked at Conrad for a long time. Then he looked past him, at Walt. And Walt understood, with the cold certainty of a man who had spent 31 years reading the moment before things went wrong, that Marcus was not looking to him for help. He was looking to him for permission. Permission to end this the right way, or the only way. Walt held his gaze, gave the smallest nod he could manage. Marcus looked back at Conrad. "You're pointing that at the wrong man." Conrad frowned. 1 second of confusion, genuine, unguarded, the first crack in the wall. And in that 1 second, Walt stepped out from behind the counter, hands up, moving slow, putting himself between the gun and Marcus. Conrad, his voice carried across the room. Steady as he could make it, this is between you and me. It has always been between you and me. He kept walking. Slow, hands up, put the gun down, and let's finish it. Conrad stared at him. The gun stayed up. But his eyes were doing something they had not done all night. They were uncertain, because this was not what he had planned for. He had planned for a lot of things over 9 years. He had not planned for a 67-year-old man in a flannel shirt walking toward a loaded gun with nothing in his hands, and nothing to offer except the truth. The rain hammered the roof. The neon lights buzzed. Nobody moved. Conrad did not lower the gun, but he did not fire it either. He stood in the center of what remained of Greer's diner. Overturned tables, broken glass, the jukebox dark for the first time in 11 years, and watched Walt Greer walk toward him with both hands up, and nothing to offer except himself. And something in that, something in the sheer unreasonable stubbornness of it, made him hesitate. Walt stopped 4 feet away. Close enough that missing was not a possibility. Far enough that it wasn't a lunge. "Put it down," Walt said, quietly, like he was asking Conrad to set a coffee mug on the counter. "You don't get to tell me what to do." Conrad's voice was steady. But the steadiness was costing him something now. Walt could see it. "You lost that right 9 years ago." "Maybe." Walt kept his hands up, kept his voice level. "But I'm telling you anyway." Conrad's jaw tightened. "You know what I thought about?" he said. "Every day for 9 years. Every single day." He didn't wait for an answer. "I thought about the look on your face in that courtroom. How certain you were. How righteous." The word came out like something bitter, like you had no doubt at all. Like my brother's life was just a detail, a line in your testimony. Walt looked at him. "He wasn't a detail," he said. "Then why didn't it cost you anything?" The question landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water, ripples moving outward in every direction. Walt was quiet for a moment. "Then it cost me everything." Conrad stared at him. "I lost my job 6 months after that trial," Walt said. "Not defensive. Just true. Not officially. They called it early retirement. But we both know what it was. I lost the only career I'd ever had. I lost the respect of people I'd worked with for 30 years. I lost," he paused, something moving behind his eyes. "I lost a version of myself I had spent a long time building." He lowered his hands slowly. Conrad didn't stop him. "I bought this diner because it was the only thing I could think of to do with what was left." Walt looked around the room for a moment, at the broken glass and the overturned tables and the rain coming through the window someone had put a body through, and something in his face was not anger or fear, but the specific exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time. "I told the truth. I believed in it. I still believe in it." He looked back at Conrad. "And I have not had one single day since where I didn't think about what it cost. What it cost you. What it cost your brother." The gun was still up, but Conrad's arm was not as steady as it had been. "He died alone," Conrad said. His voice had changed. The control was still there, but underneath it, finally, after 9 years, something raw, 3 years in, Tuesday morning, collapsed in the yard. His throat moved. "I got a phone call," A recorded message from the facility. Not even a person. A recording. Walt said nothing. He was 61 years old. Conrad's voice dropped to almost nothing. He called my name. That's what the other inmates told me. When he went down, he called my name. The room was absolutely silent. Every person in it. Marcus's men, Conrad's men, the few remaining customers still pressed against the walls, was holding their breath. Walt looked at Conrad for a long time. Then he said the thing he had never said to anyone. The thing he had turned over in his mind at 3 o'clock in the morning for 9 years and never found a way to put down. I know. His voice was rough. I know he did. And I am sorry, not for the truth I told, but for the pain it caused. Those are two different things, and I have never been able to separate them cleanly. He paused. I don't think I ever will. Conrad stared at him, the gun lowered. Not all the way. Not completely. But it lowered. An inch, 2 inches, like it was heavy in a way that had nothing to do with the weight of the metal. Marcus had not moved during any of this. He stood 6 feet behind Walt, watching, his face unreadable in the way that faces are unreadable when the person behind them is processing something too large and too personal to show. Because he knew this moment, not the specific details of it, not Walt's story or Conrad's story or the courtroom or the brother, but the shape of it, the specific shape of 2 men standing across from each other with the wreckage of a decision between them. A decision that had seemed clear at the time and had spent years becoming complicated. He knew that shape from the inside. He had made a call in Kandahar 12 years ago on a Thursday afternoon in 110-degree heat, with incomplete information and 30 seconds to decide. 3 of his men had gone left when they should have gone right. He had told them to go left. He had lived with that Thursday afternoon every day since. He looked at Walt now. This 67-year-old man in a flannel shirt who had just walked toward a loaded gun because he couldn't find another way to tell the truth, and felt something shift inside him that he had not expected to feel tonight. Not forgiveness. He was not built for fast forgiveness, and he did not trust it when he saw it. Something else. Recognition. The recognition of one damaged person for another. The specific understanding that passes between people who have made hard calls in hard rooms and have not been able to put them down since. He took a step forward. Conrad's eyes moved to him. The gun came back up, reflex, automatic. Marcus raised one hand. Not a threat, not a surrender. Just stop. I'm not your enemy tonight, Marcus said quietly. Conrad looked at him. I don't know what you are. Neither do I, most days. Marcus held his gaze. But I know what you are right now. You're a man who drove a long way to ask a question and got an answer he didn't know how to hold. He paused. That's not a reason to burn everything down. Conrad said nothing. Your brother is gone. Marcus's voice was steady and low and completely without cruelty. Burning this place down doesn't change that. Putting a bullet in this man doesn't change that. He let that sit for a moment. The only question left is what you do with the years you have left. Whether you spend them on this, he looked around the room, or on something else. Conrad looked at the gun in his hand, like he was seeing it clearly for the first time tonight. Like the 9 years of clarity that had brought him to this diner on this rainy Tuesday had suddenly become complicated in a way he hadn't prepared for. The gun came down, all the way this time. Conrad stood in the center of the room, shoulders not quite as straight as they had been. The control still there. It would always be there. It was too deeply built to leave. But something underneath it had shifted. Something that had been locked for 9 years had moved just slightly, just enough to let a little air in. He looked at Walt. Walt looked back at him. Neither man said anything for a long moment. Then Conrad put the gun in his coat pocket, buttoned the coat, and for the first time tonight he looked not like a man executing a plan, but like a man who was very tired. "This isn't over," he said. But the certainty that had been in his voice all night was gone. What was left sounded less like a threat and more like a man who didn't know how to stop saying the thing he had been saying for 9 years. "I know," Walt said. Conrad nodded once, then turned toward the door. He got 3 steps. Lily's voice stopped him. She had come out from behind the counter without Walt noticing. She was standing in the middle of the diner floor, Walt's jacket around her shoulders, torn shirt underneath. Her hands were not shaking anymore. Her voice was steady in a way that made every person in the room look at her. "I need to say something." Conrad turned. He looked at her the way people look at unexpected things, not with hostility, with surprise. "I don't know anything about what happened 9 years ago," Lily said. "I don't know your brother. I don't know Mr. Greer's past." She paused. "What I know is what happened tonight, to me, in this room." She held Conrad's gaze without looking away. "Your men put their hands on me. They humiliated me in front of everyone here." Her voice didn't waver. Conrad was very still. "I have spent a lot of years being easy," Lily said. "Being the person things happen to. Waiting for someone to step in, waiting to be saved." She glanced at Walt, at Marcus, then back at Conrad. "Tonight, for the first time, I understood something." She reached into the pocket of Walt's jacket, took out the small revolver that Walt kept there, the one he hadn't reached for all night because he hadn't wanted to escalate, the one Lily had found when she pulled the jacket around herself and had said nothing about until this moment. She held it in both hands, not pointing it, not threatening, just holding it. "I'm not waiting anymore," she said, "not for anyone. Not ever again." She looked at Conrad's men, the dark-haired one, the bald one, the big one with the black beard who had grabbed her wrist and started all of this. None of them moved. "You asked who could save me." Her voice was very quiet now, very clear. "I can. I just needed to understand that." She set the revolver on the counter behind her, turned back to face the room. And in the silence that followed, in the broken diner, with the rain on the roof and the jukebox dark and the neon lights buzzing, every person standing there understood that something had just happened that was larger than the fight, larger than Conrad and Walt, and 9 years of unfinished business, larger than Marcus and his 30 seconds in Kandahar and the stone he carried. Something had shifted in a 26-year-old woman who had spent too long making herself small, and it was not going back. Walt looked at her. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the fluorescent lights. Marcus looked at her, and something in his face, in the face of a man who had spent years building walls against exactly this kind of thing, softened. Just slightly. Just for a moment. Just enough. Conrad looked at Lily for a long time. Then he looked at the floor. Then he walked to the door and pushed it open and went out into the rain without another word. His men followed, one by one. The dark-haired one last, pausing in the doorway, looking back at the room, at Walt, at Marcus, at Lily, with an expression that was not quite what it had been when he walked in. The door swung shut behind him. Outside, engines started. SUVs pulling out of the lot one by one, the sound of them fading into the rain, until there was nothing left but the Harleys idling in the lot, and the rain on the roof, and the breathing of everyone still standing in what remained of Greer's diner. Marcus walked to the counter, sat down on a stool, picked up a coffee mug, looked at Walt. "You got anything left in that pot?" Walt looked at him for a moment, then walked behind the counter, picked up the coffee pot, poured. The coffee was lukewarm. Walt poured it anyway. 3 mugs, counter seats. The rain still going outside, softer now, like it had spent most of what it had and was running down towards something quieter. Nobody spoke for a while. That was fine. Some moments needed the silence before they could become anything else. Lily sat between Walt and Marcus, Walt's jacket still around her shoulders, both hands around her mug. She was not shaking anymore, had not been shaking since she walked out from behind the counter and said what she said. But there was a stillness in her now. That was different from the stillness of before. Before had been the stillness of someone trying not to be noticed. This was something else. This was the stillness of someone who had just set something down that they had been carrying for a very long time. Marcus drank his coffee and looked at the counter. Walt looked at the diner. 12 tables, 3 of them overturned. Glass on the floor from 4 broken windows. The jukebox dark. The neon sign outside still flickering on the left side the way it had been flickering for 3 weeks. He had been meaning to fix that. He thought, for no particular reason, that he would fix it tomorrow. The sound of boots on wet asphalt outside. Marcus's men moving around the lot, making sure Conrad's people were gone, making sure the perimeter was clear. Doing what they did without being asked, because they had been doing it long enough to not need asking. Marcus looked toward the door, then back at his mug. "Your daughter called," he said. Walt looked at him. 40 minutes ago. She picked up the police scanner, heard enough to know something was happening on Route 9. Marcus wrapped both hands around his mug. "I told her to hold, that you had it." Walt was quiet for a moment. "Did you believe that when you said it?" Marcus considered. "No," he said. "But I needed her off the road until it was over. She drives too fast when she's worried about you." Walt almost smiled. Almost. "She's going to have questions," he said. "She's going to have a lot of questions," Marcus agreed. "About Conrad, about tonight." Walt paused. "About you." Marcus said nothing. "About why the leader of the Steel Wolves was sitting in my diner at 11 o'clock at night, knowing Conrad Hale was coming." Still nothing. Walt looked at him directly. The way he had looked at people across interview tables for 31 years. Not aggressive, just clear. "You want to tell me how long you've known?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then 6 days. Walt absorbed that. 6 days, he repeated. "My contact picked up pieces. A man with resources asking questions about a specific address on Route 9. I built the picture. Took me 4 days to be sure." Marcus looked at his coffee. 2 more to decide what to do about it. And what you decided was to come sit in my corner booth and order coffee. I decided to come see what Conrad would do before I did anything. Marcus paused. I didn't expect him to bring it inside." Walt was quiet for a moment. "You could have told me." "Yes, why didn't you?" Marcus looked at him for the first time since they had sat down. Really looked at him, the way he had been not quite doing all night. The careful not quite looking of a man who is keeping something at arm's length because he is not sure what he will do when he lets it close. "Because I didn't know you," he said. 6 days ago you were a name attached to an address, attached to a threat I was trying to assess." He paused. "And because of what I knew about your history, what I knew about what you did." The room was very quiet. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. Just a drizzle now, barely audible. "Wild Bill," Marcus said. Walt went still. Not the controlled stillness of a detective managing a room. The involuntary stillness of a man who has just heard the name he least expected to hear in this context. "You know about that. Everyone who runs in certain circles knows about that." Marcus's voice was even, not accusing, not angry, just factual, the way painful things are factual when you have had long enough to accept them as part of the landscape. "William Reed, my father, arrested on federal weapons charges 12 years ago, died in custody 14 months into a 5-year sentence." He paused. The detective whose testimony put him there was named Walter Greer. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing in the room. Heavier than the overturned tables, heavier than the broken glass, than everything Conrad had brought through the door tonight. Walt set down his mug. He looked at his hands on the counter. Then he looked up. "I didn't know," he said. "Not until tonight. Not until Conrad said your name and He stopped. Started again. "I put the pieces together when you stood up. When I saw the patches." His voice was rough in a way it had not been all night. "I didn't know it was you." Marcus said nothing. "Your father was running guns across 3 state lines," Walt said. Not defending, just telling. "He shot 2 officers during the arrest. One of them was 28 years old. He had a daughter who was 4. He paused. "I testified to what I saw, what I knew, what the evidence showed." Another pause. "I believed it was right. I still believe it was right." He looked at Marcus. "And I have thought about you, the son, every year since, more than you know, more than I could explain to you." Marcus looked at his coffee mug. His jaw was tight. The tendons in his neck were visible. 12 years of something that had no clean name. Not just grief, not just anger. Something more complicated than either, moving behind his face. "He was not a good man," Marcus said finally. The words came out quiet, and they cost him something to say. Walt could hear the cost of them clearly. "I knew what he was. I had known for a long time. When I came back from my second tour and found out what he had built, what he was doing, I told him to stop." He paused. "He didn't stop." Walt said nothing. "He was still my father." Marcus's voice dropped lower. "And he died alone in a facility, in a state he had never wanted to be in. And I got there 40 minutes too late. And the last thing he said to anyone, according to the guard who was with him, was my name." Walt closed his eyes briefly, opened them. "Marcus, I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty." Marcus's voice was steady, hard-edged but steady. "I'm telling you because you asked. Because you wanted to understand what it cost." He looked up. "That's what it cost." The 2 men looked at each other across the counter. Walt thought about 31 years, about courtrooms and testimony, and the specific loneliness of being the person who tells the truth when the truth has consequences that travel further than you can see. Marcus thought about Kandahar and Thursday afternoons and the stone that had been part of his architecture for 12 years. And the specific weight of being the son of a man you loved and couldn't save, and couldn't entirely forgive. Neither of them spoke. Lily had been very still between them. She had not moved since Marcus started talking, had barely breathed. She was looking at her coffee mug, not because she wasn't listening, but because some things you can only hold properly when you are not looking directly at them. Now she looked up. She looked at Walt first. "You've been carrying that since before I was hired," she said quietly. "Not a question." Walt looked at her. "Before you were born," he said. She absorbed that. Then she looked at Marcus. "And you came here tonight, knowing all of that, and you still stood up." Marcus looked at her. "I stood up because of what was happening in front of me," he said. "Not because of what happened 12 years ago. But you knew." She held his gaze. "You knew who he was. You knew what he'd done. And you still put yourself between him and a gun." Marcus was quiet. "What does that mean?" she asked. Not challenging, genuinely asking. Like someone who is trying to understand something that does not fit neatly into the categories she was given. Marcus thought about it for a long time. Long enough that Lily had almost decided he wasn't going to answer. Then, it means that what a person did in a courtroom 12 years ago and what a person does when someone puts a gun in a room are two different conversations, he said. "And I've learned, slowly, and the hard way, not to let one conversation answer the other." Lily looked at him, then at Walt, then back at her coffee. "I want to learn that," she said quietly, almost to herself. "How to not let one thing answer everything else." Walt put his hand over hers on the counter. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. The door opened. Dana Greer came in fast, badge out, hand on the weapon she hadn't drawn, eyes sweeping the room with the trained efficiency of someone who had been imagining worst-case scenarios for the 40 minutes it had taken her to get here. She was 34 years old, dark hair, her father's eyes, her father's way of reading a room in 3 seconds and then deciding what to do about it. She read this room in 3 seconds. Overturned tables, broken glass, dark jukebox, 3 people sitting at the counter with coffee mugs. Her hand came off her weapon. She crossed the room in 6 steps and put both arms around Walt from behind. Sudden, fierce, the hug of someone who had been rehearsing a different version of this moment on the drive over. Walt reached up and put his hand over her arms. Held on. "I'm fine," he said. "You don't look fine." Her voice was muffled against the back of his flannel shirt. "The diner doesn't look fine." "The diner will be fine." She held on for another moment, then straightened up. Professional, again. Mostly. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her. "Dana Greer," she said. "FBI, and before you say anything, yes, I know who you are. Yes, I know about the Steel Wolves. And right now I don't care about any of that." She paused. "Conrad Hale, where did he go?" "South on Route 9, Marcus said. 23 minutes ago. 3 SUVs. 6 men including Conrad." Dana looked at him for a moment. "You timed it." "I time everything." She held his gaze for another second, then turned to the door and spoke quickly into her radio. Coordinates, vehicle descriptions, the specific clipped efficiency of someone who had been building a case for a long time and had just been handed the piece that completed it. Walt watched his daughter work, thought about the 4-year-old girl who used to sit on the counter of this diner eating pie while he did the books, thought about how fast time moved when you were busy carrying things. Dana finished on the radio, turned back to the room. Her eyes moved to Lily, taking in the torn shirt, the jacket, the way Lily was sitting. She crossed to the counter and sat down on the other side of Lily. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Direct, careful. Lily shook her head. "Physically," Dana said. "Are you physically hurt?" "No." Dana nodded. She looked at Lily the way Walt looked at Lily, with attention that went further than the surface, that was trying to assess something more important than cuts and bruises. "Conrad Hale's organization has been under federal investigation for 3 years, she said. "Tonight, what happened here tonight, gives us enough to move." She paused. "You're going to need to give a statement, all 3 of you. But not tonight." She looked at her father. "Tonight you go home." Walt looked around his diner. "I should stay?" "And Dad." Dana's voice was firm, gentle underneath the firmness. "Go home!" Walt looked at the overturned tables, the broken glass, the dark jukebox. Then he looked at Lily. "You have somewhere to go tonight?" he asked. Lily hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but Walt caught it. "You can stay at the house," he said. Not an offer, a fact, the way Walt dealt with things that were decided. "Dana's got the spare room made up." Dana looked at her father, then at Lily. "He'll make you breakfast," she said. "He makes very good eggs." Lily looked at Walt. He was looking at his diner, at the mess, at the damage, at everything that would need to be put back together. But his face was not the face of a man looking at a loss. It was the face of a man looking at something that had survived. "Okay," Lily said quietly. "Thank you." Walt nodded. Then he turned to Marcus. Marcus was already standing, jacket on, ready to go the way men like him are always ready to go, completely, efficiently, leaving no trace of having been there except the coffee mug on the counter. Walt extended his hand. Marcus looked at it. A long moment passed between them. Not forgiveness. Walt was not asking for that. Marcus was not offering it. Both of them knew that forgiveness, if it ever came, would take longer than one night and one conversation and 2 cold mugs of coffee. But something that was not nothing. Marcus took the hand. They shook, once, firm. Walt said, "I'm sorry about your father." Marcus said, "I know." He let go, walked toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame, looked back at Lily. "You did good tonight," he said. Lily looked at him. "I didn't do anything," she said. "Yeah, you did." He held her gaze for a moment. "You stayed." He pushed the door open and walked out into what remained of the rain. Outside, the steel wolves started their engines one by one. The sound rolled across the wet lot and out over Route 9, low and steady and receding, like thunder moving away after a storm has broken. Lily stood in the doorway of the diner and listened to it fade. Behind her, Dana was on the phone. Walt was writing an overturned table, slowly, carefully, the way he did everything. Lily's left hand moved to her right wrist, to the scar there. Old habit, the specific unconscious gesture of someone reaching for something familiar when the world had just tilted. Her fingers rested on it for a moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, like making a decision, she let her hand fall back to her side. She looked out at the wet road. at the last pair of taillights disappearing around the bend, at the rain-slicked asphalt reflecting the neon sign above her, still flickering on the left side, red and steady and red and steady. Walt would fix it tomorrow, she breathed in, breathed out, stayed in the doorway a moment longer, then turned back inside. The sun came up at 6:47. Walt knew the exact time because he had been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching the darkness outside the window thin out slowly the way darkness always does. Not all at once, but in degrees, the black becoming grey, becoming the pale washed-out blue of early morning after heavy rain. He had not slept. He had not expected to. There were nights you slept through, and nights that needed to be sat with. 31 years on the job had taught him the difference. This was the second kind, the kind where the mind needed the quiet hours to do what it could not do while people were talking, and things were breaking, and the world was demanding your attention every second. He sat with it, all of it. Conrad's face in the courtroom 9 years ago. Conrad's face tonight. That moment when the control had cracked, just slightly, just enough, and the thing underneath had shown through. Not a monster, just a man who had loved his brother and lost him, and spent 9 years turning the grief into something he could aim at a target. William Reed, Marcus's father. The testimony Walt had given that he had believed then and believed now, and would carry the weight of until the day he stopped carrying anything. Marcus standing up from the corner booth, not because Walt deserved it, not because their histories were clean, but because some things are larger than history. And Lily. Walt thought about Lily for a long time, about the scar on her wrist, and the way she had learned to make herself small, and the 8 months she had worked his floor without once letting him see how much she was holding. About the moment she had walked out from behind the counter. About the way she had held Conrad's gaze without looking away. He thought about what it costs a person to do that. To stand up in a broken room in a torn shirt with nothing in your hands and say, out loud to the people who had hurt you, "I'm not waiting anymore." He had seen a lot of courage in 31 years. He was not sure he had seen that specific kind very often. He got up, rinsed his mug, started a fresh pot of coffee. Then he got his coat and his keys and drove to the diner. Greer's diner looked worse in the daylight. It always did. Damage always looked worse in the daylight, without the chaos and the adrenaline and the noise to fill in around it. In the grey morning light, the broken windows were just broken windows. The overturned tables were just overturned tables. The glass on the floor was just glass on the floor. Walt stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at it all, then walked to the supply closet, got the broom, and started sweeping. He had been at it for about 20 minutes when he heard a car in the lot. He looked up. Lily came through the door. She had changed clothes, a sweater, jeans, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked different with her hair down. Younger and older at the same time. She looked around the diner, at the glass, at the broken windows covered now with the plastic sheeting Walt had put up in the dark before he left last night. Then she walked to the supply closet, got the second broom, started sweeping without a word. Walt watched her for a moment, then went back to his own sweeping. They worked in silence for a while. The sound of the brooms on the tile floor, the occasional clink of glass being collected, The birds outside, starting up their morning argument, the first truck rolling past on Route 9. After a while, Lily said, "Did you sleep?" "No," Walt said. "Me neither." They kept sweeping. "Dana made eggs," Lily said, "at about 2 in the morning. She said you taught her." "She taught herself," Walt said. "She just tells people I taught her so I feel useful." Lily almost smiled. Almost. She swept a pile of glass toward the dustpan, crouched down to collect it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask me anything." She stood up, looked at him. "Last night, when you walked toward Conrad, when he had the gun," she paused. "Were you scared?" Walt leaned on his broom, thought about it honestly. The way he tried to think about everything without the armor, without the version of the story that made him look better than he was. "Yes," he said. "You didn't look scared. I've had a lot of practice not looking scared." He paused. "It doesn't mean the same thing as not being scared. It just means you've learned to keep moving anyway." Lily looked at him. "Is that something you learn?" she asked. "Or something you just have?" "You learn it," Walt said, slowly, badly. "Usually after something happens that forces you to." He held her gaze. "You started learning it last night?" Lily looked at the floor. "I didn't feel brave," she said quietly. I don't know what I felt. Like something had run out. Like I had used up all the part of me that was willing to wait and see and hope someone else would handle it." She paused. "Is that what brave feels like? Because it didn't feel the way I thought it would." Walt looked at her for a long moment. "That's exactly what it feels like," he said. "Every time." They had the glass cleared and 3 of the tables back on their feet when Dana arrived at 8:15 with coffee from the gas station 2 miles down the road. 3 cups. Cardboard carrier. The specific offering of someone who knows that the coffee is not really about the coffee. She handed one to Walt, one to Lily, looked around the diner. "Conrad's in custody," she said. "Highway Patrol picked up the SUVs 40 minutes south of here at approximately 1:30 this morning. Conrad and 4 of his men." She sipped her coffee. "The 5th got away. We'll find him." Walt nodded. "The organization?" he asked. "It's going to take time. These things always take time." Dana looked at her father. "But last night gave us what we needed. The physical evidence alone." She paused. "He's not getting out from under this one, Dad." Walt absorbed that. 9 years. He thought about 9 years and what they weighed and what it meant that they were not over. Things like this were never simply over, but resolved. Moved into a different category. From open to closed. From unfinished to finished. He thought about Conrad sitting in a highway patrol holding room somewhere south of Route 9. He did not feel triumph. He had learned a long time ago not to expect triumph from the endings of things. Endings were just the place where one version of carrying something became a different version of carrying something. He felt tired. He felt underneath the tired something that was not quite relief, but was in the same neighborhood. He felt underneath that the specific complicated gratitude of a man who has survived a thing he was not certain he would survive. He picked up his coffee. "Thank you," he said to Dana. She looked at him. "For the coffee," he said. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. At 9 o'clock, Walt heard the motorcycles, 1 at first, then 2, then the low rolling presence of several engines moving at low speed into the lot. He went to the door. Marcus was on the lead bike. Behind him, 4 of his men. They pulled in slowly, cut their engines, one by one, the silence coming back in stages. Marcus got off his bike. He was carrying something, a cardboard box, not large. He walked to the diner door and held it out to Walt without preamble. Walt looked at it. "Replacement bulbs for the sign," Marcus said. "The flickering one on the left." Walt looked at him. "You noticed that?" "I notice things." Marcus paused. "You've been meaning to fix it." Walt took the box, looked at it for a moment, then looked up. "You want coffee?" he said. Marcus looked past him into the diner, at the plastic sheeting on the windows, at the 3 righted tables, at Lily and Dana standing at the counter watching. "Yeah," he said. "I'll take coffee." They sat at the counter, all 5 of them, Walt, Marcus, Lily, Dana, and one of Marcus's men named Teller, who had a broken hand from the night before and had refused to go to the hospital until Marcus had threatened consequences. Walt was glad he hadn't heard the specifics of. Walt made a fresh pot. The real coffee, not the gas station version. Nobody talked about last night for a while. They talked about the diner, about what needed fixing, and in what order. Marcus's men, without being asked, had started moving the remaining overturned furniture back into place, not making a project of it. Just doing it, the way people do things when they have decided that a place is worth the effort. Dana talked about the case in the careful way she always talked about cases. Giving enough for context, holding back enough for procedure. Lily talked about almost nothing, but she sat at the counter and drank her coffee and looked at the room with the specific attention of someone who is learning how to be in a place differently than they have been in it before. At a certain point, Marcus set down his mug, looked at Walt. "My father's anniversary is in 3 weeks, he said. Walt went still. "I go to the cemetery every year," Marcus continued. "I stand there for a while. I don't know what I say. I don't know if it matters." He paused. "This year I'm going to tell him that I met the detective who testified against him, and that the detective is an old man who makes decent coffee and can't fix his own sign." Another pause. "And that I don't know what to do with all of it yet, but that I'm working on it." Walt looked at him. "That's honest," he said. "It's the best I've got right now." Walt nodded. "Tell him," he stopped, started again. "Tell him I think about the choices I made, that I've never stopped." He paused. "Tell him that I hope, wherever that counts for anything, that the 2 officers he shot got to grow old. That the 28-year-old got to watch his daughter grow up." He looked at his mug. "And that I'm sorry it went the way it went. All of it. The whole shape of it." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I'll tell him," he said. At 10 o'clock, Dana got a call and stepped outside. Teller and the other men finished writing the last table and began the quiet process of preparing to leave. The specific, unhurried efficiency of people who did not make a production of departures. Marcus stood. Lily looked at him from her stool. "Are you coming back?" she asked. Marcus looked at her. "To fix the sign?" she clarified. "You brought the bulbs. Walt can fix the sign. Walt hasn't fixed it in 3 weeks." Marcus looked at Walt. Walt looked at the ceiling. "Next Tuesday," Marcus said. "If the coffee's hot." "The coffee's always hot," Lily said. Marcus nodded once, picked up his vest from the hook beside the door, the same hook he had used the night before, like he had already decided it was his hook, and put it on. He paused in the doorway, looked back at Lily one more time. "The thing you said last night," he said. about not waiting anymore. He held her gaze. Hold on to that. It's harder to keep than it is to find, but it's worth keeping. Lily looked at him. How do you know? Because I lost it once, he said. Took me a long time to get it back. A pause. Don't make my mistakes. He pushed the door open, walked out into the morning. The motorcycles started up one by one. Lily stood in the doorway of the diner and watched them go. The sound of them moving out of the lot, down the road, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a rumble in the distance, and then not even that. Just Route 9 and the morning birds and the dripping of last night's rain from the eaves of the roof. Walt came to stand beside her. They stood in the doorway together for a moment, looking out at the road, at the wet asphalt shining in the early sun, at the sky, clear now, the kind of clean pale blue that only comes after a storm has taken everything dirty with it when it left. Lily's hand moved, the old habit, reaching for the scar on her wrist. She caught herself, let her hand fall, stood up a little straighter. Walt looked at her. She looked back at him. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. After a moment, Walt turned back into the diner. Lily stayed in the doorway a moment longer, looked out at Route 9, at the road that kept going in both directions further than she could see. She thought about waiting, about all the years she had spent making herself small and quiet and easy to overlook, and hoping that if she just waited long enough, just stayed out of the way long enough, things would eventually become safe enough to breathe in. She thought about last night, about the moment she had walked out from behind the counter, about how her hands had stopped shaking, not when the danger passed, but when she stopped waiting for someone else to face it. She breathed in. The air smelled like rain and coffee, and the particular clean that comes after something has broken and been survived. She turned back inside, picked up her broom, went back to work. The neon sign above the door kept flickering on the left side. Walt would fix it next Tuesday. But right now, there was a diner to put back together. And that was enough. Some nights change everything, not with explosions or speeches or moments that announce themselves as important. Sometimes it's just a chair scraping back in a corner, a man standing up who didn't have to, an old cop walking toward a gun with nothing in his hands, and a young woman deciding, in a broken diner, in a torn shirt, in the middle of the worst night she'd had in years, that she was done being the person things happened to. Nobody saved Lily Shaw that night. Walt Greer stood between her and harm because he could not do otherwise and still live with himself. Marcus Reed stood up because the man he had chosen to become required it of him. But Lily stood up because she finally understood that waiting for rescue is its own kind of cage. And she had been in enough cages. The storm that hit Greer's diner on that Tuesday night in November broke 4 windows, destroyed 1 jukebox, and put 3 men in federal custody. It also broke something else, something smaller, something that doesn't show up in police reports or insurance claims. And she had been in enough cages. Maybe you have too. Drop a comment. Which moment hit you hardest tonight? Walt, Marcus, or Lily? Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And if this one stayed with you, share it with someone who needs it. We'll see you next time.